Welcome, everybody. This is the Music Production Podcast, and I'm Brian Funk, also known as AfroDJMac, and I'm here with Tom Filepp from Cars and Trains out in Portland, Oregon. Tom, how you doing today?
I'm doing all right. How you doing, Brian?
I'm doing great. Nice to say hello again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thanks so much.
Oh, thank you. I really do appreciate your time to get a chance to talk to you about some of the stuff you do and share our love for making music, I guess.
True.
Yeah, so how's things going? What you up to these days?
Things are good. I'm actually wrapping up a brand new Cars and Trains album this week.
Oh, cool,
so this is kind of funny timing. Yeah, just mixing in some strings and maybe redoing a couple of vocals and then sending it off. So, yeah, it's cool to get back into that.
That's super exciting. So, how long have you been working on the album?
That's a good question. I guess probably about 6 months or thereabouts. I've maybe had a few sketches laying around here or there, but yeah, pretty much just started in the fall once I released my last album for my other project. Just kind of pinging back and forth a little bit.
Right. Oh, very exciting. I'm glad I'm gonna get to hear some more music from you. I'm a big fan of what you do musically because it kind of combines a lot of things that I like about music and what I'm into these days with, kind of like an electronic thing, but there's a lot of organic sounds going on, a lot of interesting instruments that you use, and especially almost like a lot of, I think in your little blurb on Bandcamp, it says electronic folk toy instrument live looping craziness. That just sounds really cool to me. A combination of some great things right there.
Nice. Yeah, it can be hard to kind of pin down sometimes, but it's, I have sort of an ethos of anything goes, when I'm recording stuff, whether it's, using drum machine samples or, just literally taking some old cardboard boxes that I have in the closet and just wailing on them,
Oh, yeah? Nice.
So
I guess that makes like a percussion type thing. Some fun sounds. That's cool.
You throw some compressor on that and you got a pretty decent snare drum.
Yeah, like found sounds. I always get a big kick out of like just all the way back to like listening to the Beatles growing up. Like just I always love that you have like just anything can make music really if you're just creative with it.
Exactly.
Yeah, cardboard box is pretty cool. I've recently moved, so I've got a few of those lying around I should play around with.
There you go. More. You've got an entire drum set.
Yeah, right? Nice. Any fun sounds you're using? Any cool instruments on the new stuff that you've, maybe it's something different that you've tried out with?
Let's see. I mean, a lot of the usual suspects. There's maybe not as many new things that I've tried on the acoustic side of things, in terms of cardboard boxes and, pots and pans. But, I have been messing around with a lot of smaller synths. And one of the things I really love is the Bastel Instruments stuff. I don't know if you've ever seen that floating around, but it's a small synth company in Brno, Czech Republic, and one of my favorite things that they make, it's called a micro granny. It's like a granular sampler synthesizer, just like this little thing, and you just put in some samples and just kind of cut them up granularly, and you can pitch them or you can just really tweak them and make them sound insane. And so I use that quite a bit for, some sort of non-musical effects and things like that. But it's been one of my favorite things to play around with for sure.
Yeah, that thing looks like a lot of fun. It's pretty like homemade kind of deal, right? This is not like a huge company. It's if I'm not mistaken, it's are they handmade or?
Well, they are handmade to a degree. They definitely have a team of folks that are building these things at this point. I was on tour in September in the Czech Republic, and they actually gave me a tour of their operations. It's pretty pretty neat. You can actually see some photos of it on my Instagram. But yeah. I mean, I think some of the things are like the circuit boards and stuff like that. They're obviously,
Right.
they're being made in large quantities. But yeah, I mean, all of it's really cool. But yeah, super nice folks. A lot of their stuff. So they have a lot of like Eurorack sort of gear.
Nice. Yeah, I love, like these kind of like it seems like we're getting a lot of these small kind of really unique instruments that are happening, like maybe produced in smaller quantities, not the big factory produced, mass produced things. And some really interesting stuff. And I'm kind of looking at the page right now, and yeah, it looks like a lot of fun can be had with their work.
Oh yeah. It's all these boutique sort of
Yeah.
synths and effects. It's amazing what's out there. And I mean, you can just roll your own with an Arduino board. I think some of theirs are based on our Arduino originally, but yeah, it's something I've wanted to do is to build like guitar stomp boxes out of Arduino.
Right.
Would be a really fun project.
Nice. Yeah, I've got the at Megatron, Soulsby at Megatron, and it's like an 8-bit digital synthesizer, and it's all Arduino based, and there's always updates where you can change the actual synthesis engine of it,
Oh yeah,
which is so cool. Like, because you get this instrument, and the next thing you know, it's got like a whole new update, and now it's a drum machine. it's,
yeah, it's amazing. And
I
if
wish
you-
I
if
knew a
you're-
little more about all that programming that went into it, so I make my own stuff with it.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is that so many of these things are open source that you could just open it up and the Arduino language is pretty similar to C or C++, I think.
Oh, yeah.
I started tinkering with it a bit, but it's one of those, things that you get into and then you stop making music after a while, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to do everything, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, thankfully there's a lot of people out there doing some cool stuff. Hey, this microgranny looks awesome though. I bet you get some like really cool sounds out of that. I'm excited to hear
Yeah.
what that does for your music for sure.
Definitely. But yeah, I mean, other than that, I kind of focus more on, I got more strings and percussion into my home studio. And so I kind of focus more on just trying to get better source sounds,
Yeah.
both, switching out microphones and preamps and stuff like that than maybe that I had done in the past. So that was fun
Right.
as well.
Nice. Do you do most of your recording at home?
These days, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, unless it's something really loud, like my other project, True Deceiver, is like a sort of electronic doom metal, I guess, sort of, and to get those sorts of like detune frequencies to really work, you have to be in a big room
Yeah.
and loud, pushing the air. But for a lot of this stuff, yeah, I just I'll set up a couple of ribbon mics for the strings or things like that. It tends to work out really well, and I've got some acoustic treatment in my home studio and stuff, so it ends up being pretty good overall.
Yeah, nice. That sounds like a lot of fun. It's always like cool to have everything kind of by your right where you are, right where you live in, so you can really do it almost any time you want when inspiration strikes.
Yeah, it's definitely good. I would say that the one downside of it is particularly, I mean, it applies to anything, but particularly recording vocals. If you're recording your own vocals, it's obviously a little bit harder to be objective about it. And, if you try to fix things or if you're using a little bit of inline compressor or something like that, it tends to be a little bit more of an arduous process than it would be otherwise. But
Yeah. Well, you're wearing a lot of hats at that point. You're recording, you're trying to perform, and it can be a lot. I mean, that's usually the biggest hiccup for me is anytime I try to do recording vocals. And probably a lot of it is, just my lack of singing ability too, which doesn't help. But
yeah, it can be hard to get into that headspace when it's like you're being the engineer and also trying to do a performance that you're trying to convince people.
Yeah, because a lot of it's about like letting go and getting
Exactly.
loose, and you have to at the same time remain somewhat analytical and clinical with
Exactly.
your work. But that's cool. That's so more strings on this one, huh? Are you playing the strings? Do you get people to play them?
I had some folks come in and play cello and violin.
Mm-hmm.
It sounded really great. I do play viola, but I'm pretty rusty, and I don't think I will want to subject myself or other people to that at this point. So,
Those stringed instruments are tough when you're not very good at it. I have a cello, and I'm a guitarist, and I can pluck some notes out, but once I put the bow to it, it sounds like I'm torturing some poor animal or something.
oh yeah,
It's quite. There's a lot of technique that goes into that I just don't have.
yeah. The intonation part is not bad, but if if you either don't have the chops to begin with, or then you just don't practice for years, it goes away and it sounds pretty rough. The one thing that I do sometimes to get around that is I'll sometimes just plug. I've got a K and K piezo pickup for my viola, and so I'll plug it into my guitar amp. I'll put a bunch of delay on it, and
Yeah.
maybe loop a little bit, and that sort of stuff you can get away with because the guitar amp obviously is not reproducing tones above like 5K.
Hmm.
So you can't hear those really horrible things.
Yeah, the screeching of the bow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always nice to watch things in effects when they're not coming along.
Yeah.
Little s-
All else fails.
a fun secret. Just
True.
throw some effects on it; it'll be fine. Fix it in the mix.
That's for sure.
So, how was the tour you on in the fall? You said you were
Oh,
in the Czech Republic, and that sounds like a good time.
yeah. I try to go back every other year. I think I was out for only about 3 weeks this time, but I usually do a circuit. I'll go through Germany and France, and a lot of the shows will be in Czech Republic. That's just kind of how that landed. I've got a bunch of friends there that I've made over the years. Uh, I went to Budapest this time.
Hmm.
Um, Slovak Republic, which is always great. Yeah, Austria, just kind of all over the place. It's really nice. It's the shows are generally really good, and just friends that I've made over the years put on a lot of them. So it's like this. Obviously it's hard work. I'm actually touring on the train because I've got pretty portable gear. You know, which is both good and bad because you're on the train, you just get to like look outside and see the landscape going by, but also because you're by yourself and
Hmm.
lugging 60 pounds of gear with you up and down these like not very safe train steps and stuff like that. But the flip side being I get to see all these folks that I've met over the years, and it's definitely not a vacation, but it kind of it's a good recharge for me, I would say. It's just you see community all over the place. It doesn't matter what country it's in. Just people helping each other out, and putting together these great shows, and coming together on that. So it's really nice.
Yeah, that's a great way to see places. I never went anywhere out of the country, but I've done some East Coast tours with bands, and it has sort of the vacation vibe a little bit, especially the way we did it because it was pretty, do it yourself. But when you get to a place, it's not like the tourist version of it. You're in the community. You're actually part of the community in a lot of ways because you're performing and
Exactly.
you're in the culture there, and you get to like see what people actually do. And people that are kind of like you with similar interests, like this is how they do it in their area. And I always enjoyed that a lot. And it's usually a pretty quick connection with people.
Exactly. Yeah, it's really nice. I really like that, particularly in like the DIY spaces and squats and things like that.
Yeah.
It's really something else. And those are obviously extremely important spaces for a bunch of different reasons. Obviously, we were talking about gentrification and stuff like that before. have these creative spaces, creative outlets for different communities and safe spaces for different groups of folks that might not necessarily have another place to go to. So it's really something to be able to be a part of that, even if just for a day.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of my favorite places to play were the ones that there's like, no sign on the door. It's just some warehouse somewhere. And like
Yep.
you have to like really be told where to go to know how to find it. And
Exactly.
the do-it-yourself thing is just so much fun because there's a lot of heart and soul in that. Where it's and half of them are like very cheap to get into and really supportive of any kind of arts. So I guess when you have the more established places, they got to sort of rely on the tried and true things. I know,
Yeah, there's less flexibility for sure.
yeah, around here in Long Island, they've made some good venues, but it's not really gonna be much for like kind of the local artist. It tends to be like whoever's touring through, and a lot of cover bands, and
Yeah.
that's just because you got to get people in the doors and buying drinks and whatnot.
Yeah,
So
the cover band thing is, yeah, I remember that, where I grew up, there was definitely, there was a bit of live music going on, but yeah, it was always, people wanted to know what they were hearing in a lot of cases. So
yeah,
yeah, it's a hard thing to compete with.
yeah, it is. It's a little more reliable, I guess, and the people that want to hear new live music are a much smaller percentage of the crowds. But when you find those good little niches, it's just great. And it's fun to see them in different parts of the country and in your case, the world.
Definitely.
Yeah, nice that they're opening their arms to you. That's really great.
Yeah, it's really something. It's, and just to be able to travel from country to country and not have to worry generally about, passports and stuff like that. It's just, it's really pretty neat.
Yeah. Nice. Are you going out to tour after you release this new record?
I'm still trying to figure that out. I definitely need to at least do some stuff in the States this year. I'll probably do some regional things, up in the Pacific Northwest, maybe down to San Francisco. And then I'm thinking about doing something in the Northeast as well. Haven't quite figured out what that means yet, but it's been a while since I've been back playing shows out there. So
Yeah, that's cool. You got to let me know. I'll definitely be coming out.
cool.
I look forward to that. Yeah, the first time I became aware of you was when you were on Ableton's site. It was I'm looking at it now. It says Cars and Trains Ableton Live is the engine.
Yeah.
I guess a little play on words there. And you were playing on a radio station. I think it was up somewhere out in Oregon, if I'm not mistaken. The station.
Yeah, it
But
might be Kabu, might be it. I don't remember,
yeah,
but
I'd never really seen anyone use a melodica before, and I remember when I bought my melodic at the music store, I knew the girl working there, and she was kind of like, "Are you kidding me?" She like couldn't believe I was buying a melodic. I was like, "What do you mean? Like, come on, like I'll make use of it. It's cool. It's fun. It's easy to play, and it's pretty expressive too." And but she just saw it as a toy, and then it was just cool like to see. Because on the video, it's actually a still of you playing the melodica, and like right off, I was like, awesome. As soon as I saw that, I was like, you had me.
man, and that was that whole thing with Ableton. It was amazing. It was really funny too because obviously a lot of folks that use Ableton tend to use it for specific purpose, and it became apparent that a lot of people use it for more I guess techno
Yeah,
side of
yeah,
things, and which there's 1,000 different ways you can use Ableton. There's no right or wrong way to do it, but there was a lot of really positive response to that piece, but there was also a lot of like, what the hell is this sort of stuff.
oh man,
It was really funny, and I think a lot of it had to do with the melodica too, which no regrets. I still got my melodica, and I'll bust it out anytime.
Yeah, well, what are people hating on the melodica for? That's such
Yeah.
a shame. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's something I encounter a lot when I talk to people, and they ask what you use, and you bring up Ableton Live. There is that like misconception, I'd say, that it's just for electronic music, but for me, as like I think of myself as a guitarist, kind of singer songwriter at heart, rock and roll kind of thing, but. It's such a great tool for me for that. So it was fun. I guess I'd say you were one of the first people I'd seen using it. I think they had a piece on Pete Townsend too at one point that
Oh,
kind
that's
of,
awesome.
yeah, a long time ago. It was kind of like when I was still thinking about if I should try it out or not. I was like, oh, Pete Townsend uses it? That's kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah. That's sold. So I think Dave Bazan from originally from Pedro the Lion. I think he's using Ableton a decent amount for live stuff now. That's what I've heard. I haven't seen him play in a minute, but and that's really cool to me because like you were saying, coming from rock guitar sort of stuff, that's kind of where I come from. Maybe like a little bit heavier on the spectrum, but so to hear that someone that I equate with being in a rock band is using that
Yeah,
for live performance is like, oh, well, that's neat.
right. Yeah, it shows like it's just another tool, really, I guess, just like anything else. Yeah,
Exactly.
you can have melodicas in techno.
It's true, and I swear I've actually heard that too. But it's kind of funny too. I guess this kind of ties into a regional thing, depending on where you're playing a show. But the different reactions to using a computer, using a laptop
Yeah,
in live performance too, is really funny to me. And I think that's partially like a generational thing as well. But I've definitely had varied response there, uh, which is also interesting to me because one of the key things about the way that I use Ableton is at least traditionally, I never ever would have something pre-recorded. That was
right.
always my rule. I started to bend that a little bit, but it used to be absolutely every last piece needed to be, I could use samples, but everything needed to be built on the fly.
Hmm.
Uh, so I just thought that was interesting. I would occasionally play a show and people would be like, real musicians don't use laptops and sort
Yeah.
of stuff. And it's like, well, maybe, but maybe not.
Yeah. I've seen that change over the years
Yeah.
since I've been doing it. And, because I can remember myself like going to concerts and be like, why is there a MacBook on stage? Like, what is that about? And as I started playing with that very same device on my stage, I found that there were some people right off the bat, they're like, oh, come on. And they'd tease you. They'd like, say things as you're setting up. And a lot of maybe the older guys too were
Yeah,
like tough to convert. But
that's true.
I've found like the openness really happened. And there were a few guys in particular that stick out in my head that were kind of in the local scene that I can remember coming around and being like, you know what, that was kind of cool, I admit. Like, kind of, that was kind of neat what you did there.
Nice.
Yeah,
Y-
it's fun sometimes to see that, but it's I guess like you said, generational is big too, because like I don't think kids these days at all, like they just think music and laptops and computers is how it's happened like
Yeah,
forever.
yeah, exactly. It's always been nonlinear. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, it's interesting because it's gotten to the point now where stuff like amp modeling software has gotten really, really good.
Yeah.
What is it? Positive Grid Bias has an amp modeling software that is incredible, and they've put out a physical like power amp that you can plug your guitar in. You can download whatever amp you modeled into the head
Hmm.
and play it like that. And so you basically have an infinite, you know, amount of settings you could do. You could swap the power tubes or the, stuff like that pretty easily, just within the software. But you can go to like metal shows now where a lot of the guitarists, they use the amp modeling software in the studio. It sounds great. And what they end up doing is they just use the same amp modeling software on tour.
Hmm.
And so they don't have amps. It just all goes into the board sort of thing. Because it's, for a lot of those bigger shows, it's being mic'd anyway. It's all coming from the PA.
Right.
So it's really interesting, in those cases, you'll see like a laptop on stage, or maybe it'll be hidden off, but, there's no amps sort of thing, which is really wild. And as someone that appreciates, physical objects, I've got a nice tube hovercraft amp over here that I absolutely love. It's just so interesting that you can do that, and that the live processing has gotten to that point where you can do that. It's pretty neat.
It is wild, and it's a lot easier than carrying around a 412 speaker cabinet.
Yeah.
But I have to, like, just in my head think like the appearance of those big amps behind like a metal band, especially.
Yeah.
That's a big part of like the stage.
Yeah.
How do you do without that?
I kind of wonder if there are any shows that I've been to recently where they had like prop
Right.
amps, like they're not actually like, they're just facades or something like that.
I think
It'd
they
be
did that a
hilarious.
lot, especially the 70s and
Oh
the
yeah,
80s,
when
But
it's
it's
on a
just,
Marshall or
yeah, 35, Marshall stacks.
yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Van Halen did that with the 5150,
Yeah, right.
4x12s. Yeah, that stuff is nuts. But yeah,
I do remember reading a few years back, probably like 10 now, but one of the bands I loved growing up was Weezer in the
oh yeah,
early days, and they were doing like I think a record store tour. It was kind of like after they came back, after they released Pinkerton and took some time off, and Rivers Cuomo was talking about using the I think it was the pods at the time that Line 6
yeah,
had,
yeah, yep,
and
exactly.
he was like, I don't want to admit this. And every like part of like his like metal shredding background was like hating him for it, but he's like, these sound better than my amps live, and they're so much easier to carry.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you should bring that up because the what's his face, Justin Broderick, Godflesh, Yesu, all of those projects. There was a certain point. I don't think he still does it, or maybe he uses different amp modeling software. But he's actually like unabashedly come out and been like, "Hey, I use those pod 6 or whatever. I use those on a bunch of recordings."
Hmm.
And if you go back and listen to it, it's like, oh yeah, that's definitely what's going on here. But yeah, I mean, I guess the bottom line is, if it works, why argue with it, right?
I totally agree. There's a lot of like pride and snobbery that goes on, I think, with gear. And I've definitely been there and probably
Yep.
still have various things that I'm doing that I don't even realize I'm doing right now. But it's funny when like the stuff that like is like totally uncool catches up and it's like, wow, that's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
You sort of have to like admit defeat or something like that.
Yeah, and there's an interesting current, that continues. I think it started to surface in the past couple of years, where all of a sudden, it's gotten easier and easier to make music. Whether that's a question of the equipment getting cheaper, but having the same quality, or if that's actually particular software or controllers that make it easier to just play chords, or
Yeah.
to sequence drums and things like that. And there's a part of me that's like, well, damn, I've been a musician. I've had some education and stuff like that. Like, geez, what, 26, 28 years now. And so, there's like the reactionary part of me that's like, that's
Yeah.
not cool. But
Not fair.
but it's really beautiful. I mean, it really democratizes music, which I think is important, because music belongs to everybody, and whether that's that actual performance or not, to be able to have that at your fingertips, to be able to express yourself, I'm all for that. Sometimes I get a little weary when I see these things that are, they're like machine learning AI things that came up
Yeah.
with a jazz song or something like that. But I mean, what can you do about that? But yeah, I love the idea of making everything as accessible as possible to people. I mean, on the converse side of that, obviously, I think musicians, just like any other worker, should be fairly compensated for their work. But uh, just to not conflate the two ideas of music being accessible, just to make that clear.
Yeah, it is cool that and I have that same part of me that practiced my scales on my guitar. That's kind of
Oh
like,
yeah,
oh, what the hell? This is not right, you know? But
yeah,
um it is cool that like anyone can do it, and it really does like open up the world to just more music and more creative ideas and more advancement, I think, because sometimes I think your knowledge gets in your way a little bit,
yep,
where the things you know become like rules and dogmas you follow, and then it takes somebody to just not do it for you to see that, oh yeah, you can actually go against that and it works out.
yeah. Just intuit it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
without
it's interesting. I learned all this music theory years ago, and I think both consciously and unconsciously have unlearned a decent amount of it. Obviously, there's still some practical parts that I've retained, but I'm not just like, oh well, what mode would try to figure out like exactly what fits in a song. But just kind of more like, does this thing that I played work or does it not?
yeah.
Just kind of rely more on gut reactions than necessarily diving too much into the actual theory of it, which is beautiful stuff, but not always necessary and could sometimes slow you down a little bit.
Yeah, it's a nice thing to have those sort of instincts to fall back on, but to also be able to balance that with some kind of freedom of just like you said, the gut reaction or how you feel, or just move it just to see what it sounds like. I
Exactly.
I have students that are in my high school program that are doing some music, and sometimes the way they just like drag the chords around in the MIDI piano roll, you're kind of like,
Hmm.
oh, I don't know, and then it's like, oh, but that was cool. That worked out. That was neat. There's that like educated part that kind of says, uh-oh, I don't know, but
Well,
it's nice to just see that sort of like, you know it's like just like a kid running around not knowing you're not supposed to go that direction, or like an animal that just goes and doesn't realize that they're not supposed to do that, and they come across something interesting.
true. Do you watch Bob's Burgers?
Yeah, the kid's got the sampler. Yeah, I've
Oh
seen
man.
a bunch of those episodes.
So the guy that does Bob's voice, John Benjamin, he recently did a jazz piano album,
Hmm.
and I don't remember exactly what it's called. He doesn't know how to play the piano, uh,
Okay.
and I think the album is actually called "Should Have Learned How to Play" or something. Should have learned to play the piano, and it's really funny. Yeah, I mean he's got like a bunch of really good players on this, and it's pretty traditional stuff. But like they start playing, and he starts doing stuff, and it's like he's just kind of mashing his hands on the piano keyboard, and it's like, oh man, this is really funny. Uh, then you can hear him actually yell in the background, like, play it, so and so, whatever. Someone's doing a solo. His voice sounds exactly like it does on the show.
Right.
And so that's hilarious. But then when they get to about the second song, most of the stuff they're playing is modal.
Uh-huh.
And by the second song, like all of a sudden it's like, this isn't funny anymore because he kind of almost sort of, I don't want to say he figured it out, but like this is starting to actually kind of almost fit. You know,
Right.
it's like it's not necessarily proper modal stuff, but it's like, all right, this kind of yeah, it's kind of hilarious because I mean, not to belittle modal jazz because I that's like my favorite thing. Miles Davis, like late '60s throughout the '70s, all that sort of stuff. Herbie Hancock, all of that, but it's just kind of funny that we learn all these things, but you can sometimes just instinctually kind of successfully express yourself regardless of your background. I think
Yeah.
is the short of what I'm rambling about.
That is cool because you can sometimes just kind of bang something out, and even if it's not right, I think especially if you repeat what you do.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, that's Miles Davis's thing. Like making a mistake sound right. Like
Yeah, it's not a mistake if you do it twice.
exactly. Just yeah. I remember watching some video of Herbie Hancock just being like that was among other things that was one of his biggest Miles Davis's biggest genius things was that there were no wrong notes. You own the notes.
Yeah.
And then it becomes the right note sort of thing.
Yeah. It's freeing when you're improvising, and it's funny how, I guess because we're organizing noise, right? When we're making music.
Yeah.
So if you organize your mistakes a little or make them not mistakes, then who's to say?
Exactly.
That's
exactly.
Cool. You mentioned the AI stuff. I hope I'm right about this. I think because I don't watch a ton of TV, so it must be something like this. But I think I was watching those new Bill Nye Saves the World episodes that were coming out. Bill Nye the Science Guy. I want to say this is where I saw it, but they had a computer study and analyze Rembrandt paintings. And the facial structure, like, okay, this is what an eye looks like. They study them all, and they were able to get it to like reproduce like an eye. And then finally they did all of the features and then had the machine paint a portrait.
Yep.
And it was incredible. And it was down to like the brush strokes, and I guess they 3D printed it. But the question was like, is this art? What makes it art then? If like it suddenly can be a computer.
Yeah,
maybe it's the programming that's the art. I don't know, but it was really pretty wild to look at, to know.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely raises a lot of questions. I mean, does the art belong to the algorithms that created it, or does it belong to the programmer? You know? I mean, yeah, you could really dive into that. Like, I mean, just very core questions of consciousness and stuff like that, and identity and blah blah blah. But yeah, it's really neat. AI is, and I mean that's probably, I guess that would be considered narrow artificial intelligence. Just how much algorithms dictate so much in our lives anymore. It's both really interesting and also kind of scary, but and just the sort of unfettered drive to reach a general artificial intelligence is what they're going for. Like we've got all these algorithms and devices that have a narrow intelligence that can do stuff like like Siri can take voice commands and pull up basic things, or even a calculator is a narrow artificial intelligence. It's really good at that one thing.
Yeah.
Whereas these computer scientists and other scientists are trying to make a general one that's sort of mimics a human mind, where it's actually good at everything on a general level, which is pretty interesting. And that's where that machine learning stuff comes in, and potentially gets a little scary after a point.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if like maybe all the theory and rules we learn for, say, making music is not just sort of like a computer algorithm that gets programmed in, and you're kind of just sort of selecting from your knowledge base, what you know. That's kind of my takeaway of that painting was just like, so if you learn how to paint an eye, then you're kind of always referring to that, and it's sort of what the computer's doing. You start wondering if you're like a computer yourself.
Yeah, are we in a simulation?
Right, the simulation theory, where if it gets that good, how do we know we're not already in it?
Exactly.
Interesting stuff. I guess you can tie your brain in a knot thinking about that.
Yeah,
pretty easily.
I mean, I would totally suggest, if you haven't seen this, there's a blog called Wait But Why that goes into a lot of really interesting subjects, scientific stuff, and
Mhm.
they have this two-parter about artificial intelligence that is really fascinating. They go into other things like cryonics and Fermi paradox, all that sort of stuff. It's all really well done, but really accessible. Like
Yeah.
I'm not a scientist, so it's good to have these things sort of broken down. Definitely suggest checking it out if you get a chance.
Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, me too. Not a scientist, so I need it kind of put into terms I understand. And there's a lot of good stuff like that out now. And that's why I was enjoying I've only watched, I think, 2 or 3 of these Bill Nye things, but I loved it. And I think it's something like someone like Neil deGrasse Tyson does well, is kind of
Oh
just
yeah,
make you just take it out of like science jargon and just be like, hey, man, think about this and put it into perspective for you.
yeah. Just break it down and be like, in a reasonable way, and also just they seem like nice guys too. So
Yeah, yeah. Like they're as smart as they are, they're still kind of like relatable.
yeah, exactly. I'm trying to remember who it is. I think it might be my cousin. Refers to Neil deGrasse Tyson as Space Dad. So,
Space,
pretty
yeah,
awesome.
that's good. Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's like kind of that friendly guy. It's like, let me tell you something. Look up at the sky, and he give you something to think about. Yeah, it's. I wonder where this is all gonna take. Like our, you know, compositions. I forget, even if you forget if like it's actually a computer doing it, making music, like the tools we all use. Um, what we have now has come so far where I'm sure there's a lot of people that look at it kind of like we were saying before, we're like, oh, that's not how musicians make music. But when is it, where is that going to go? What's the next step? The next big breakthrough, I guess. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of foresee like hit factories kind of just being partially, at least
Mm,
algorithm, if I can even say this, algorithmically powered,
yeah.
where they say these are the aspects of all these different hit songs. So let's, you know, feed this into this machine learning and figure out a way, which is interesting if that were to happen, particularly because I think there would be a point where things would get even more homogenized and you would have to step back from it. But it's an
Yeah,
interesting thing to think about.
it is. Yeah. Like what does it become? It just becomes that kind of, I guess that's where the art falls away. And
Maybe.
I don't
I
know.
mean, maybe not.
I guess people will find a way to be artistic within whatever it is they have. Even if
Exactly.
even if it is like a hit factory tune, you still have like the singer interpreting it and putting their own spin on it and bringing
Yeah.
something to the table.
Yeah. I mean, it's all still art. I mean, I think even if you had that where it's a machine that was writing some of it or something, there's still, as long as you have people involved and they're not really winging it or something.
Hmm.
But
I guess there's a lot of people probably that would say, and what's the difference? you know, maybe like artists think they're so important just because that's who they are, just like anyone else in any other realm would say about what they do.
true.
Who knows? Fascinating though. I'm excited to see where it goes. I've tried to come to peace with all these ideas of like, it's nothing's cheating and nothing's cutting corners really. It's all just a different way of doing it.
Exactly. It's just a tool.
Yeah. And I still will always find it interesting to come back to just an acoustic guitar and just playing without anything for any reason, not being recorded, just to be in the moment doing it too
Yeah.
is is a special thing. And I wonder if that type of thing becomes even more precious as we move more into these directions,
Yeah, you would
or
think
if people
so.
stop caring. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely a big fan of just kind of sitting back and just taking a break and zoning out and doing some of those jams like I used to do when I was a kid. I mean, I used to just like lay down on the floor with my guitar and just let it rip.
Yeah.
And I've tried to do that more recently as I have an electric guitar again, and it's really nice because obviously you're kind of seeing things from a different perspective. Where I mean, you can't really comfortably look at the fretboard and stuff like that, so it kind of opens up you know new possibilities. I think because you know maybe
Yeah.
you're more prone to make a mistake, or maybe you just get more confident, or
True. Yeah. Your finger lands on the wrong spot, but it sounds cool anyway.
exactly.
Yeah. I for so long, um, 'cause, I mean, I got into like recording what I was doing with music almost right away.
Yeah,
Just even if it was just a little tape recorder, so I could just jam along with like a rhythm guitar.
yeah,
But so I guess it's like been really imprinted in me that like every time I play guitar or play some music, it's sort of like where's it gonna go? What am I gonna do with it? And the idea of just doing it, who cares? Like let it go. And I love that. I love sometimes just sitting around and I might be writing a song with no intention of ever remembering it.
hmm
Just because like there's something about when you decide to capture something, it changes it a little bit.
yeah. Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's definitely good just to be able to do things just for enjoyment's sake. Although I cannot even begin to tell you how many times I've been like, thousands and thousands of hours of stuff that I've done where I'm like, wow, that was it.
That was your masterpiece, right?
And yeah, and then you're like, oh well, crap, I can't do that again, and I wasn't recording it. So,
Yeah. I think those
but
things tend to swell too in your head when you don't get to hear it again. You sort of like romanticize it.
yeah, it's possible if you get lost in the moment, maybe you are kind of inflating it a bit. But I guess that's sort of like, I don't know, doing
Yeah.
some acid or something and thinking you're painting the best painting ever, and then waking up the next day and it's the worst thing ever.
Looks like peanut butter and jelly smashed around.
Exactly.
But I guess like to have that feeling is something of value in itself, just even if it's
Yeah.
in that moment. I mean, I've had that where I go to bed like, yes, I did it. This is it. This is the coolest thing I ever made. Then you listen the next day like, oh, it just doesn't strike you anymore.
Yeah.
Um, I guess anyone that's made any kind of art or music has had that experience.
Yeah, it's all part of the process. And that's I think, I mean, what matters kind of in the end is it's the process of doing these things. Obviously it's great to have people hear it and all that. Whether it's just to share it or for validation purposes or whatever it could be. But yeah, it's really the actual doing of it
Mm.
that at least for me that's what matters. So yeah, you might get those brief pangs of regret where you're like, damn, I wish I was recording that, or but
Yeah.
yeah, bottom line is it's I did XYZ for me, so it's all right.
Yeah, it's something I've been trying to do myself a little bit is just kind of be okay with there being almost like no point to it other than just doing it.
Yeah,
Just playing, just being in the moment, playing, especially with other people too.
yeah,
To just enjoy playing with someone else and bouncing ideas off each other, whether or not it's good even or something you would enjoy yourself.
yeah,
But just
and
that exchange is nice.
exactly. Yeah, I need to do more of that. That's actually a big thing. But I guess the bottom line too is if we are actually in a simulation, there's probably some redundant backup somewhere.
Yeah, right.
So
There you go. That makes me feel a little better. I can go back and pull my masterpieces out. They
uh,
didn't really get away. Oh, geez, who knows? There could be technologies in the future that can play back things that weren't recorded.
yeah, just somehow get the vibrations off the wall or something
Oh, there
that
was
they
like I think I think it was something on like a watch, a smart watch or something that it is recording, I guess, all the time, I guess is how it works. But
Yeah,
you can go back in time kind of or something. I don't
it was
know.
only 30 seconds. I think I saw some Kickstarter like you
Uh-huh.
could only ever like it would delete things after then,
Okay.
but it would always be like 30 or 60 seconds, you know, of
Yeah.
material. So you're like, oh wow, that was a good idea, and you go back. But otherwise, it is still ephemeral.
Yeah, that's not enough because by the time I get back to it, 30 seconds has passed. That time went too fast.
Exactly,
By the time you load the app.
exactly.
Hmm. But I don't know. I guess like once you decide something is captured or recorded or is going to go somewhere, it does change your experience with it. And
Yeah,
that it has to be presented now. It has to be, um, I guess, presented or showcased or whatever. But now it's a little bit different instead of just being, like you said, lying on the floor, and that's just the whole point.
exactly. Although one thing that I did actually find out or discover, so we live in a house. It's 100. Let's see. No, it's older. So it was built in 1908. So
Mm-hmm.
it's mostly we rewired it, but there's a couple of stray knob and tube sections still. And one of the things I realized is that every once in a while I'll get a little bit of line noise, when I'm recording microphones and stuff like that. Uh, but it wasn't until I laid down in the middle of my studio, which is on the second floor, that there's a light on the ceiling in the living room below me that has old wiring, and there's a bunch of noise interference, and so I'm like laying down with my guitar, and all of a sudden it's just like
Mm.
sort of situation, and realizing at that moment that anytime I was recording any kind of microphone and I would run the microphone cable over that spot on the floor, it was picking up that same knob and tube noise.
Oh, wow.
I'm sure it doesn't help that I think that light is it's got a dimmer built into it or something like that, but it's just like, oh man,
Hmm.
this is like, 5 years of where is that sound coming from? I've isolated everything. We've got, I got like there's a dedicated or somewhat dedicated circuit coming up here, all that. And after all that time, it was just that damn light.
Yeah, wow, that's funny. Or not funny, depending on how you
No,
want to
it's hilarious.
look.
I mean, I even got, at some point I bought Isotope's RX5, I guess
Yeah.
RX6 at this point, software, which is really fantastic. And I was isolating, some of those buzzing things that way, which works really well, but, it'd be better just to not have it in the
Yeah.
first place.
Well, yeah, you can kind of like highlight it's like the spectrum you see visually, right? And you just sort of,
Yeah.
yeah. I've
Yeah, I
messed with
think
that a little bit.
it's very similar to, I think, Adobe Audition used to
Mhm.
be. Um, but yeah, it's much more powerful, and yeah, you can just kind of juggle through the frequencies and isolate certain things, and it's very smart about how it takes sections out. Like it'll delete the frequencies, but it's sort of like a soft delete where it heals the frequencies around it a little bit, so there's not some kind of weird artifacts after the fact.
Yeah, okay.
It's really nice. I'm actually like a relatively newcomer to the Isotope stuff. I use their mastering stuff just as like a reference when I'm mixing,
Right.
which is really nice. And then I also started using their Neutron
Oh,
thing.
cool. You like that?
It's really nice.
Yeah, I want to try that. That looks really nice. Yeah.
It's something like that. I always kind of approach with trepidation, because
Yeah.
it's like this will fix everything, sort of
Right,
thing.
yeah. That's marketing, maybe.
But just as a general channel strip thing,
Hmm.
with the EQ and the, occasionally I'll use the compressors. I usually like to use like some of the wave stuff instead. But the transient shaper, I mean, it's really nice. And the real place where that plugin shines though is there's like a masking visualizer.
Yeah, that's exactly the part I'm interested in. Yeah.
It's really cool. I mean, it's like I can get the mixes to a pretty good point, but there's a certain point where, whether it's the acoustics in my room with my monitors or, I've got, partial hearing loss in one of my ears. So sometimes it could be hard for me to pin down certain frequencies, or certain problem areas. So it's really nice to have that visualization just to kind of be like, oh, all right, yeah, there's definitely some collisions happening around, 200 hertz. And, like actually you can compare, you compare two different tracks that have the plugin on it, and like you can attenuate in one and at the same time have a boost in the other and all kinds of crazy stuff like that. It's really neat. And I swear I do not work for Isotope.
Well, that's what I wanted to check out, honestly, for that reason, is because it's something I'll do a lot, like the kind of complementary cut and boost in certain tracks to like kind of carve my mixes a bit. And it's kind of blows my mind that it took me as long as it did to realize it, but you really can't have too many things in any given spot in the spectrum of frequencies.
Oh, yeah.
And it was just, I mean, when I first started, I wanted my guitars to be deep and heavy. I wanted my drums to be deep and heavy, my bass. And then everything just sounds like mud. I'm like, what the heck? I listened to it solo. It sounds great, but you can't do that. And once I learned that you can't do that, I was kind of blown away, like how much better things started sounding.
Yep.
But I think I'm starting to come to terms with the reality. Like kind of I was saying before, you can't do everything.
Exactly.
I'm not an audio engineer. So the mixing part, though I do enjoy it a lot, it is fun. It's like you're putting your song together. But sometimes like the little like EQ things or, like the masking frequencies or that stuff can be the more tedious stuff for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I do like the idea of something kind of helping out a little bit, telling me where to look. And also just for like educational purposes, because I think once you start seeing that, you become familiar with it and start to understand.
Exactly. Yeah, it's pretty amazing, and it's an interesting process when you start to go past that curve, realizing that I mean, it's just like any other physics where two things can't exist in the same space at the same time. Right. Unless somehow we come up with some kind of quantum mixing, but yeah. And once you get to that, it just kind of, it's a pretty interesting process. And, and I had actually thought of sending my albums off to have someone else mix it before. And I'm totally not opposed to that at all. But the problem that I have is my songs will end up, with all the little textures and, found sounds and all the little extra things here and there. Mm-hmm. A lot of them, there'll be like 60, 80, 90 tracks. And I just can't do that to someone. I can't have that on my hands. It's just a terrible thing to do to someone. So yeah, I think this is it's kind of like having, just a robot hand to kind of help guide you a little bit, like a second pair of ears, to be like, well, this is coming together really pretty well, but hey, Tom, you really need to attenuate this because it's just really muddy. So yeah, it's a nice process though. I love, it's one of the things that I love about, the audio world. It's like, I've been doing this for so long and I'm just every day just still learning so much. It's a really great part of it.
Yeah, it's a constant discovery thing for me too, and that's I think a lot of the fun of it. The kinds of things in life that you can do and like sort of never totally figure out and never master and just keep exploring and keep discovering things are just, you can never get bored. You can never get tired of doing it because something always kind of gets uncovered and discovered.
Exactly. Yeah. I just even think about the first time I went into a mastering studio. I had my first EP mastered by Jeff Lipton in Boston, who's absolutely amazing. but obviously we're going through the session and he's pointing out like all these things. Did you intend to do that? Sort of things like
A nice
things
way
I
of,
just didn't. Yeah, exactly. But the thing that was the best was that I actually didn't know that I have a little bit of hearing loss in my right ear,
oh wow,
and we're
that
going we're going through like the process, and he's like, "Do you know that on all of these, the right channel is quite a bit louder than the left channel?"
hmm.
And so that was when I learned that like I had been compensating
Yeah,
and
wow.
and doing that, and so it's an interesting process, from learning that and then realizing both for my individual sake, but also in general, like how much, obviously there's a lot of stuff that, we need to do with our ears, but there's also a lot with mixing that we need to have visualized and you know, recognize the limitations of what our ears might be able to tell us.
Yeah, and I get that in the rooms I'm working in. Like you mix in one spot, then you listen in another spot, and you realize, oh my God, what did I do to this mix? The bass is out of control, or
Yep.
it's non-existent, or ow, this hurts my ears now because I'm
Yeah.
in my car. And it's funny how that all changes all the time. And I think you're right. Like having someone else give a go at a mix, and I guess especially mastering, as that's like a pretty fine art, the art of subtleties. And it's pretty interesting to hear how it comes back to when you have somebody play around with your track, and then that's how they would have mixed it.
Exactly.
And they're also not as committed to your sounds. So say you have your cardboard box snare drum that you would just love because it's the cardboard box and you worked on it, and then someone else might hear and be like, we don't need that.
It's like,
And
what the hell is
well,
that?
I've spent the whole day and a half, EQ in that one. It's like, yeah, we don't need it. It's like,
Exactly.
I didn't, so I don't care. It's a
Yeah,
nice way to
that's
like kind of understand what the focal points of your track should be too.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the bottom line. When you're working on your own stuff, regardless of whether it's actually getting another engineer in or just even just bouncing ideas off of people, being like, is this a terrible idea? It's really nice to have that input, and I try to do that. I've got a couple folks that I'll bounce things off with, but yeah, it's
Mm.
definitely it's an essential part of it if you really want to push things far. And particularly you were talking about, having the frequency collisions with the different instruments.
Yeah,
Um, a lot of mixing and the way that we perceive the finished product is psychological as well, and it
true.
just like you were saying, like, oh man, this guitar sounds great. Oh, this bass sounds great, and it's like to make it sound good in the mix, you sometimes kind of have to make it not sound great solo, and that
Hmm.
can sometimes be a hard thing to get over.
Yeah, I have this like really cheap Radio Shack microphone I keep around.
Hmm.
That when I first came across this mic, I think it came from a garage sale from one of my buddies. And we were finally buying like a decent mic, like a condenser, even just like we were just getting into that. And so we kind of joked around about the mic, this like cheap old mic. But what I found was like, yeah, it sounds kind of garbagey on its own, but in the mix, it like, it suddenly like fits itself in nicely.
Hmm.
And it was like a weird thing to like come to terms with, like, well, this is not supposed to sound good. I know this is not a good mic. And I listened to this track. It sounds like garbage, but I can hear it nicely in the mix when everything's playing.
I love that. That's great.
Yeah, I came to like a big realization with like my guitar mixing when I found out, like someone just told me that the low E string is 80 hertz in
Hmm.
the frequency spectrum, and I was like, well, then why am I, boosting like 60 and 40, and
Oh
what
man.
all that other stuff is getting in the way, and I found that I was actually kind of making my guitars sound a little thin on their own, but it helped them fit in the mix, and it allowed the bass to sort of, push the rest of the guitar through the mix, and together they sounded more cohesive.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about mixing guitars in bass. I mean, really, guitars, bass, and drums, which I guess in a lot of cases is everything. But it's depending on the style of music too, where like you kind of perceive the guitars as being like maybe 80% of the guitar to bass sound, like it's what's causing it. But for like a normal rock song, a lot of times it's like a 60-40 sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I mean, to go even more extreme, so I have another project called True Deceiver, which is what I mentioned before, the sort of doomy electronic thing. And mixing that was was really interesting because I play a baritone that's tuned down to A standard,
Oh wow.
and then the
Nice.
bass on it is tuned down to A standard, octave below. So that A is 26 hertz.
Hmm.
And did not realize until I was mixing that how much the bass for heavy music. I mean, obviously, to a degree, but I used to think that more of the heaviness, the frequencies in the mix would be, the guitar, like a similar 60-40 ratio. But for heavy music, you have to kind of look at it in a completely different way, where the guitar is actually probably 30 or 40%, and then the bass, makes up the rest of that. And it's a really hard thing to do when you're, come from like a guitar centric sort of
Yeah.
place. Really interesting and really really difficult project to mix because of the then you get the drums, they're around the same frequencies, and everything's just, you have to really let go of everything to be able to make it all work.
Sure, and like all the attention to detail we guitarists put into our tone and our amp
Yeah.
settings and all that, and then here I come with the the high pass filter, just cutting it all out.
Yeah.
I guess like if you're mixing a band, don't let the guitarist be in there when you start working on his guitar.
Oh yeah, that's the worst.
You're
Yeah, I
gonna
mean,
want to go away for this.
exactly. Yeah, that's I can remember being in bands and sitting there while they're mixing stuff, and no one should be in the room at that point.
Oh, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing?
Yeah,
That's my tone. Come on, man.
exactly.
I got that bass boost pedal on. Yeah, we're gonna get rid of that.
Yeah, that's for sure. Oh.
I wanted to ask you something, kind of before we wrap up here, just about your thoughts, because this is something I struggle with a little bit. Because you mentioned that you like to keep, or at least especially in the past, you'd like to keep everything new when you perform live. So there's no pre-recorded stuff. There's no like backing tracks or anything. And I struggle with the whole concept of like, am I really doing anything, or am I just hitting play? I might have some clips looping. Am I adding this? But one of the things I run into as a problem is that, say I like do a track from scratch, right? Where I'm starting everything. Maybe it starts with a beat and I add things, I layer things. When it comes time to get to the next section of the song, it's kind of weird to just stop everything and then build that part from scratch.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? How do you handle that if that's something you're trying to do, as a kind of almost like a philosophy that where everything has to be new?
So there's usually two things that I'll do. The first thing that I do is, absolute first, is I'll lay down like a really basic beat that can be used either in the verse or the chorus or whatever.
Okay.
And then what I'll do is I usually have a map to a MIDI controller, but I'll fire the old Command D or Control D that'll just duplicate that phrase to the next scene in Ableton. And depending on how many sections I have, I'll do that multiple times. And so baseline, I have at least that beat. So it's like nothing really ever completely falls out. Two other things that I've done there is I'll take almost like I'll make like a pedal tone sort of bass instead of actually having like a bass synth play the actual chords.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just play the root and have that going, and I'll do a similar thing where I'll just Control D, and so that way
So you've got
there's
like a
some
drone almost.
yeah, there's like some glue there, and
Yeah.
it kind of follows the rhythm more than it does the chords, and that kind of helps to hold everything together. The one other thing that I found that I've done either with Ableton's Looper, or there was this really cool similar looper that I used to use, but it's not. They don't make it 64-bit. I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head. Sort of similar to the Super Looper plugin. Is I'll just kind of record like a similar sort of drone root thing. Like, you know, I have my acoustic going into my live set, and I'll just record like a pretty diatonic root chord and have it play backwards. You know, and whether that's like a, you know, really short thing, you know, like you know, a quarter note, or if it's a half note or a whole note or whatever. And so that's going too sometimes. And so between those three things, even if you have to go to the next phrase, you know, you have that as your baseline. So it doesn't feel like everything just kind of drops out on you.
Yeah.
It's, you know, depending on the song, and, you know, if there's a really big change going from one section to the next, that might not work. But for, you know, a lot of these songs I do, they're relatively diatonic. So it's just like, all right, now that sort of pedal tone and that, you know, that atmospheric stuff is now like a fourth, you know, below or above what I'm doing, but it still works. You know, it takes a little bit of, you know, finding the right thing, but yeah, I found that really helps a lot.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, it's smart too. So it can be like kind of weird. You finally get the groove going, and then all of a sudden, all right, got to make the next part. Hold on, everybody. You know?
Yeah.
And you start from script. But if you got those things kind of going, you know, you can jump right in a nice way.
Yeah, it's like, it's sort of, I mean, I think of all those, the one that I would do, you know, I'll do the sort of pad backwards thing the most, because that kind of, it's like a safety net, sort of, you know, like worst comes to worst, like, oh man, I missed my cue. This is not, you know, the measure I wanted to do it on. It's going to take me another measure or two to actually set this up. It's all right, because that, you know, that stuff is going on in the background. It's not like, you know, someone pulled the plug out of the PA or something.
Oh God, yeah. I've had things like that happen.
Me too. I've actually had you know, when I had it's like a PreSonus audio interface that had FireWire, and FireWire doesn't lock into the laptop. And, you know, and I think I was using someone else's table that was flimsy, and I hit the table and the FireWire just came right out.
Oh no.
And so I just started playing acoustic songs. That's the nice thing about having an acoustic guitar with you, is you just started playing stuff acoustically while strumming and trying to put the FireWire back in.
Yeah, you're not naked without anything that can make any sound, which is good.
Yeah.
And you know what? And that's cool too, because I think people respond to that when you're playing live and something goes wrong, and you find a way. You know, you go with it.
Exactly.
You don't throw your hands up and like curse the equipment or the venue or whoever bumped into your thing. You know, you roll with it. Yeah,
I mean, that's kind of, that's the ethos that you have to go into with live looping, is kind of, you know, if I could visualize what it is, my attitude towards live looping, it's probably would be a shrug emoji. You know, like, it's just like, shit happens. Like, it's gonna happen. It's gonna go wrong. You've got tons of equipment. It's gonna be okay. You know.
Yeah. And that is the fun too of the live performance. That
exactly.
Stuff can happen, bad and good.
Exactly.
I like that. So that's fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it's what makes it special, I think, for both for yourself and also for the audience. If they're like, oh, well, shit happens, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then you were here and this happened tonight, and that's unique.
Exactly.
You got this unique experience. You didn't just get the same thing that happens every night or every place or on the record. That's what makes the moment and the time, makes it worth being there for the show. That's cool.
That is true.
I'm trying to do a couple questions that I'll ask everybody, and I've forgotten to do this a handful of times, so sorry if anyone was expecting me to do this. But what would be like your, and I've decided I want to separate this, maybe like a piece of hardware and a piece of software. If you could have just the one thing, like it's kind of like the desert island question, if you only have, if there was just one thing, maybe piece of gear or something, what would that be for you?
Well, I'm going to answer with a question, which is this for production or live?
It's for your own personal satisfaction because you're alone on the island, right?
Okay, fair enough. Well, that's a tough question. I mean, if it's like if it literally down to that, I'm going to give you the most boring answer, which is my acoustic guitar, because I don't need, headphones or an amp or anything like that. Like it's familiar. I can get a lot of different variety out of it. Not an exciting answer, but
that's the same answer I had.
Nice.
My acoustic guitar is a special one. It's a 1960s Gibson that my grandfather gave me. That he had. Geez. And it's a small guitar too. It's this. I think this, the scale from the neck to the bridge is a little bit smaller. The neck is tiny. It's tinier than any of my electric guitar necks, and it's got a like little punchy sound. Nice. It's not a big full guitar. It's I love it though. I mean, it's like my favorite instrument. So that's what I would take too. So I don't think it's stupid. What about software? What would you do in that case? We'll assume you have an electric outlet somewhere.
Yeah, and some headphones or something like that.
Sure, yeah.
That's a real good question. I guess just in terms of versatility, getting the most things done, I would probably bring Audio Mulch. I don't know if you've ever seen that program.
No, I'm not familiar with it, actually.
It does a lot of things, including you can do some looping and stuff. It's kind of really high learning curve, but lots of it's kind of like the old school granular synthesis program, but it does just about anything you could possibly imagine. It's got a very sort of pure data sort of vibe in terms of the interface. It's possible that it's even based on pure data. I'm not 100% sure on that. But that would be where I would go with that, is Audio Mulch without question.
Cool. I'm looking at it online now. It almost looks like Max or something.
Yeah. You know what? I think it actually is based on Max. That's probably what it is. There's this one section of it where you program different patches, and then visually, either with like a touchpad or with your mouse, you can set different zones on this area where you can just slide to it, and kind of mixes the different patches and lets you kind of more expressively play like an instrument. It's pretty wild.
Cool. I have a feeling I'm not going to get involved in that.
Yeah, I would only recommend it if you've got nothing else going on and you don't want to get things done, because it's pretty incredible, and it's just a huge rabbit hole. Yeah,
right. And but learning curves are, I don't know. I got enough of them in front of me, I guess.
And save it if you're ever on a desert island, and then you got all the time.
Right. Then that's the only thing I'll have. It'll be worth investing the time in.
Exactly.
Cool, man. Well, Tom, listen, thanks so much for taking time and, letting us know a little bit about some of your process and some of the things you're into, and super excited about the album too. That's a fun surprise for me.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much, Brian. I really appreciate it. I really enjoy all the stuff that you do, and, love following all the stuff that you've been posting and everything over the years. So it's great to finally connect, and
Well, thanks, man. It's pretty cool for me when someone that I'm paying attention to and listening to is like, "Hey, I know what you're doing." So that was a little trip for me too.
Yeah, that's great, man.
But so everybody, check out Cars and Trains if you want some electronic folk toy instrument live looping craziness. It's really fun stuff, and it's different and it's interesting. It's a bit groundbreaking, if you ask me. I think you'll all like it if you don't already know it, so check them out. And again, Tom, thanks so much for being here with me.
Thanks so much, Brian. Take care.
You too.
All right. Bye.
Bye.